Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new legal breaking reporting video analysis update. Donald Trump's demolition of the White House East Wing sparks controversy. Let's get into the reporting. We have 3 total reportings today, this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
White House sideswiped by ballroom demolition controversy by Brett Samuels. President Trump's demolition of the East Wing to make way for a new ballroom built this week into a full-blown controversy for the White House. Images of the East Wing abruptly being turned into a pile of rubble caused a visceral reaction for Trump critics, who saw it as a symbol of the ways the president has degraded the White House. Historians and preservation groups have expressed their dismay, and reporters have peppered administration officials with questions about changes in the project's scope and cost. As is typical in the Trump White House, the president's team has gone on often said to try and shape the narrative and dismiss criticism as manufactured or hypocritical, appealing to their base in the process. The administration has dismissed attacks on the project as manufactured outrage. Donald Trump Jr. has rebuffed critiques from members of the Clinton family by pointing out scandals during their time in office. The Trump team also updated a page on the official White House website to include a timeline of major events. The timeline largely consists of significant construction projects, but Trump aides added in then-President Bill Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky, the discovery of cocaine in the building during the Biden administration, and a 2023 Trans Day of Visibility celebration at which one attendee was topless. We have been keeping you apprised of this project. We have shown you the renderings, and if you look at the renderings, it is very clear the East Wing was going to be modernized, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters Thursday. The president wants to do right by the people's house. And so that is exactly what he is doing, she added. It is going to be much more stable, strong, secure, and more beautiful than ever once it is complete. Republican strategist Susan Del Percio, who does not support Trump, acknowledged the story has not been a good one for the White House. But in a week where the government is still shut down, and on the heels of massive No Kings protests, the White House might welcome another story. Yes, they were caught flat-footed, but they do not care, Del Percio said. The White House had announced at the end of July plans for a $200 million ballroom adjacent to the East Wing. Trump had for years sought to construct a similar space at the White House. The project got fully underway this week when, to the surprise of many, construction crews began tearing down parts of the East Wing. Images of mangled metal and rock stunned observers who were not expecting part of the country's most famous building to come crumbling down for Trump's project. The original White House announcement said the ballroom would be substantially separated from the main building of the White House, and Trump said the structure will not interfere with the current building. It will be near it but not touching it, and pays total respect to the existing building, which I am the biggest fan of, Trump said on July 31st. Leavitt faced a barrage of questions during a Thursday briefing with reporters about the demolition of the East Wing. Journalists pressed her on whether the president had authority to tear down any building he wanted to in the nation's capital, why the cost had increased by $100 million, how much of Trump's own money was going toward the project, and why the public was not notified that the East Wing would be raised. With any construction project, there are changes over time as you assess what the project is going to look like, and we will continue to keep you apprised of all of those changes, Leavitt said. She argued the administration had been transparent, pointing to the July 31 announcement outlining the project and the models of the proposed ballroom Trump kept on display in the Oval Office. Leavitt argued the East Wing demolition did not require outside approval from the National Capital Planning Commission, saying only new construction had to be reviewed by the panel before it is moved forward. And she confirmed the price tag had risen to $300 million, while noting the cost would be covered by private donors, not taxpayers. Critics have argued the use of donations could open the door to private companies and individuals using ballroom donations to curry favor with the president. The White House throughout the week deflected criticism from historians and Democrats about the scope of the project by pointing to past renovations and changes to the building. White House officials pointed to the 1902 construction of the West Wing, the 1933 expansion of the West Wing, and construction of the East Wing, the 1948 rehab of the building's interior, the 1973 addition of a bowling alley in the basement, and the 2009 work that turned a tennis court into a basketball court. Even some Democrats have acknowledged the utility of having a large event space at the White House. State dinners with foreign leaders are typically held under a temporary tent constructed on the South Lawn, and large indoor spaces in the White House can only hold a couple hundred people. But it is the way Trump has gone about tearing down the East Wing that has touched a nerve. I do not think that there is any question a ballroom is probably needed, Michael LaRosa, who served as press secretary to then First Lady Jill Biden, said on Sunrise on the Hill. But I understand a lot of the sadness around the East Wing because I feel it myself, he added. Amy Parnes contributed.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that reporting comes our second reporting of the evening, titled East Wing demolition triggers outcry and mixed feelings from state dinner attendees. Let's get into the reporting.
East Wing demolition triggers outcry and mixed feelings from state dinner attendees, by Judy Kurtz and Amy Parnes. The demolition of the East Wing at the White House to make way for President Trump's vision of a splashy, massive ballroom is triggering an enormous outcry from critics. But for many who have experienced glitzy state dinners firsthand, it is eliciting mixed feelings. Trump, who originally said the ballroom would be near, but not touching, the existing building, revealed Wednesday that the entire East Wing was being demolished following conversations with architects. In order to do it properly, we had to take down the existing structure, Trump, flanked by renderings of the ballroom, told reporters in the Oval Office. The $300 million project, originally announced in July, and estimated at that time to cost $200 million, will create a 90,000 square foot ballroom that Trump has said will be funded through private donations and serve as a beautiful space to host world leaders. Critics have lambasted Trump's changes to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The East Wing of the White House is being demolished so that Donald Trump can construct a ballroom where he will be celebrated like a king. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, said this past week. They are going to spend $200 million to build a large, fancy White House ballroom. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, said shortly after the ballroom plans were unveiled in July. It keeps getting worse, Schumer said. But some past state dinner attendees and journalists who have covered black tie events at the White House say there are some practical purposes behind the controversial project. If you have ever been, you know that there is very limited space in either the state dining room or the East Room, said Sean Spicer, the former White House press secretary in Trump's first term. You are talking about 200 people that can fit into the East Room, Spicer said. It is very limiting in terms of what you can currently do, how many people you can have, what events you can have. But if you can fit close to 1,000 people, which is what they estimate for this, you can suddenly open the White House up to a lot more people for a lot more events, Spicer said. One former White House aide acknowledged that large events were always annoying because of the lack of space, saying that sometimes big dinners would need to be split up among various spaces, and some attendees would be frustrated that they were not in the same room as the president. Democratic strategist Jamal Simmons, who worked as communications director for former Vice President Kamala Harris, acknowledged that there are space concerns for big events. There is an argument to building an entertainment space, Simmons said. The question is what the plan looks like. The president had lamented the use of outdoor tents for state dinners, built to accommodate additional guests, describing them as a disaster when it rains and more than a football field away from the main entrance. I think part of the joy and specialness of the state dinner is you are dining inside the White House. You are eating off of china that is historic, and using the silver and the crystal and all those things, said Kate Bennett, a former CNN White House correspondent who has covered multiple state dinners. What people do not realize is that the White House curators do not allow those items to leave the physical building of the White House, meaning not even to go down to the tented dinners. Everything is rented, essentially, said Bennett, who is now a communications strategist. For me, the state dinners that were in the tents just felt a little more performative than traditional, Bennett said. But Bennett disputed Trump's criticism that the tent being set up 100 yards from the White House was problematic. It is not a pretty sight. The women with their lovely evening gowns, all of their hair all done, and they are a mess by the time they get there, Trump said this month. No one was sinking their Manilow Blahniks into the South Lawn. That was not a thing, Bennett said, adding that shuttle buses or trolleys were provided for guests from the White House to the tent set up for the state dinners. Josh Letterman reflected fondly on the Italy state dinner in 2016, the last one hosted by President Obama, that he attended as a guest while a White House reporter for the Associated Press. The event was held in one of the outdoor tents that Trump has belittled. It was stunning. It was clearly a lot of work for the White House staff to erect that whole tent and all of the decorations, said Letterman, now a fellow at Princeton University's School of Public and International Affairs. Everything was impeccable, and it was really incredible to see that space set up in a short amount of time and then just prepared in such a beautiful and welcoming way. The addition of the East Wing came in 1942, during Franklin D. Roosevelt's presidency. Originally built to provide room for additional staffers and workspaces, the East Wing eventually became the hub for the First Lady, serving as the location of her office, as well as the social secretary and several other departments. Hillary Clinton has decried the construction of the ballroom. It is not his house. It is your house, and he is destroying it, the former Secretary of State wrote of Trump in a Tuesday social media post that came before the commander-in-chief acknowledged the East Wing was being razed. None of the representatives for the other living former First Ladies, including Laura Bush, Michelle Obama, and Jill Biden, responded to the Hill's requests for comment about the demolition of the East Wing. A spokesperson in Melania Trump's press office declined to comment, and the First Lady has not made any public remarks about the project. Some frequent visitors and guests at the White House have expressed a profound sadness at the destruction of the East Wing to build the ballroom. It feels devastating to lose all of the history and tradition of those spaces, one past state dinner guest said. You think of the towering figures of American history who have graced those spaces over so many years, and to think that those are being swept away feels like a real loss, the person said. Since the demolition began, a stream of photos have been posted on social media, featuring memorable moments of former presidents and first ladies in the East Wing. In one photo, Ronald and Nancy Reagan take in a movie in the White House Theater. In another snapshot, Barack Obama runs alongside his dog, Bo. Another photo shows former First Lady Rosalind Carter talking with an aide in her office. The East Wing was also where a number of First Lady initiatives began, including Bush's literacy efforts and Obama's Let Us Move campaign. For many, it is more than a building. It is part of the nation's history. And those, like Simmons, who have worked on the White House grounds, questioned how it was allowed, virtually unchecked, to begin with. My question is, if the president can decide anything he wants about changing the White House, what if he decided to paint it purple? Said Simmons, the former Harris aide. There must be some structure around physical changes, which is a national monument and symbol of the country, Simmons said. Spicer refuted the idea that the demolition was erasing history, maintaining that the ballroom is simply an addition. There is no erasing anything, he said in an interview. I have not heard anyone complain so far that I have seen about the architecture. It is in keeping with the current thing. It looks great, Spicer said. If you look at what is happening, this mostly comes down to the fact that it is Trump who is doing it, Spicer said. That is it. Michael LaRosa, former press secretary to Jill Biden, remembered peering out his office window, which was in the East Wing directly next to the First Lady's, to gaze at the great view of Marine One flying in and out. While calling the space being reduced to rubble sad and heartbreaking, LaRosa said Trump's ballroom is a necessary addition. We hosted the French, who hosted and entertained at the Élysée Palace. We hosted them on a tent on the South Lawn, he said of the 2022 state dinner at the White House. I do not think that there is any question a ballroom is probably needed, LaRosa said. But I understand a lot of the sadness around the East Wing, because I feel it myself.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, comes our third reporting for the afternoon. Let's get into it. This one is also read by an automated voice, so we will be taking a look and a listen, as well as a read.
Trump feuds across Latin America spark questions over region's future. By Rebecca Bache. President Trump's targeting of boats in Latin American waters has kicked off a dramatic shift in the approach to the region, one that threatens to upend many partnerships long relied on by the White House. The Trump administration has authorized military strikes on boats they claim are ferrying drugs off the coast of Venezuela and in the Pacific Ocean, resulting in at least 43 deaths. The strikes have been highly criticized, and the actions prompted Gustavo Petro, president of neighboring Colombia, to accuse the U.S. of murder. Trump responded by slashing security aid to Petro's country, one of the closest U.S. partners on drug enforcement, and on Friday issued sanctions against Petro personally, accusing him of failing to clamp down on cocaine production. To see this kind of treatment of Latin America, this sort of very colonial way of treating the region, threatening military intervention, sending 10,000 troops to the Caribbean, these are things that we just do not have any real parallels in the last 100 years, said Adam Isaacson, Director for Defense Oversight at the Washington Office on Latin America, a nonprofit that advocates for human rights in the region. It is also a massive shift from former President Biden's root causes approach, which sought to stem migration in the region through investments in local economies, education, and stemming violence and corruption. Rebecca Bill Chavez, president of the Inter-American Dialogue, said that while the Trump administration is giving appreciated attention to an area often overlooked by other administrations, they risk jeopardizing relationships with allies while unwinding decades of strategy meant to counter growing Chinese influence. The approach leans more on coercion than cooperation, heavy on sticks and light on carrots. It emphasizes the region's problems instead of its potential, she said, all things that could undercut U.S. efforts to be the partner of choice in Latin America. The Trump administration claims it is taking out the boats to stop drugs that would otherwise flow to the U.S., But at the same time, Trump has said he approved covert CIA action in Venezuela and dedicated 10,000 troops to support counter-narcotics operations, raising the specter the U.S. might seek to topple Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The killings have raised numerous legal and practical questions. Petro said a strike in Colombian waters killed a lifelong fisherman. Senator Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, who noted the U.S. Coast Guard fails to find drugs in about a quarter of interdicted boats, saying, "We cannot have a policy where we just blow up ships where we do not even know the people's names, or whether they actually are transporting drugs." Others have argued the small boats simply are not large enough to reach the U.S. or to carry enough drugs to back Trump's claims the narcotics could kill thousands of people. It all comes down to President Trump understanding what no other president has really understood before. He says that we are at war with the drug cartels, said Melissa Ford Maldonado, director of the Western Hemisphere Initiative at the America First Policy Institute. And so I think that the president believes that acting decisively in Venezuela sends a very powerful signal to all of them. So it is like a, hey, shape up, because we are changing course when it comes to our national security. Critics say the actions are not really aimed at drugs, but regime change and confronting disfavored leaders. Efforts they do not think will be successful, and instead will upend U.S. credibility in the region. I think a major component of their Venezuela policy is a naive but politically very, very sexy idea that if we take down Maduro in Venezuela, Cuba will then immediately collapse right behind it, said Fulton Armstrong, an American University professor and director of Inter-American Affairs at the National Security Council during the Clinton administration. They have done at least one operation off on the Pacific side to make it look like it is not just regime change in Venezuela. It is protect the motherland from poison drugs. But with Petro, it is now a personal pissing match, he told The Hill. The tensions have caused anxiety in Cuba, which has strongly condemned the actions. The pretexts for this extraordinary and irrational military deployment by the United States are groundless and rooted in deception. It is legally and morally unacceptable to use such claims as grounds for perpetrating a military aggression against a sovereign state. The threats to peace, security, and stability in our America are real and imminent, Cuba's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said earlier this month. Confusion and concern over how to handle the Trump administration are widespread in Latin America, particularly amid a number of threats. Since taking office, Trump has threatened to take military action in Mexico as a response to drug cartels. And the U.S. policy in Colombia is a notable reversal. Colombia was one of the largest recipients of U.S. aid in the region, most of it as associated with Plan Colombia, a 15-year effort that funneled billions to bolster the country's security and combat drug production. To the Trump administration, Plan Colombia was a failure. Ford Maldonado called the situation disappointing given years of hard work by Colombia, efforts she said have eroded since Plan Colombia ended in 2015. Colombia worked really, really hard and earned its place as a very trusted ally, honestly through decades of a lot of sacrifice and a lot of death and a lot of violence. But they were able to stand firm against cartels so that they could be in Washington's good graces, she said. So I think a lot of the talk now that the U.S. is walking away from Colombia needs to be reframed, because it is really the other way around. Colombia was our closest partner in the drug war, and that partnership has completely eroded, not on our side, but under their government right now. Many see the boat strikes as a way to confront governments that have frustrated the Trump administration, but critics fear it will end poorly for the U.S. Isaacson said the Trump administration would need far more troops to carry out regime change in Venezuela, and he raised doubts the U.S. will invade that country even as the Pentagon on Friday ordered its largest aircraft carrier to the region. I do not think they are going to invade. So where are they going? They are going to keep escalating. If you do keep escalating, putting the screws on Maduro because you want him to leave, do you have to offer some kind of exit? Meanwhile, you are treating Colombia in a way that they are not going to collaborate with whatever the pressure strategy is. Others said Trump's public acknowledgement he would authorize covert CIA action in Venezuela was meant to put pressure on that country. It is psychological warfare. It is psyops, Armstrong said. It is basically to try to spook Maduro and to give a signal to the people in the military that now's the time to rise up. The U.S. has a poor track record when it comes to intervention in Latin America, including past efforts to remove leaders. It is a reason the region is poor. It is a reason it has not made as much progress on education innovation. It is a reason why even issues like corruption remain difficult to tackle. And yeah, the United States' role in picking and choosing dictatorships because they are anti-communist at the time was a huge reason, Isaacson said. Armstrong said the U.S. has intervened to oust multiple leaders, only to leave countries in chaos. We are sort of good at kicking people out. We are very good at tearing down systems. We are not very good at doing it with people that can credibly set up a new system, he said. Chavez said the U.S. public would also have no appetite for U.S. deaths in Venezuela, particularly if any military action went from sea to land. There is so many reasons that would be bad, she said. Venezuela is a super big country. There is so many armed groups. The U.S. would be stuck there, right? It would not be something where the U.S. could come in easily and then get out easily. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Thursday that Trump is uninterested in any de-escalation with Colombia, and the same appears to be true for Venezuela. Armstrong said the U.S. may do so to its own detriment. Having watched how we work, knowing the limitations of our intelligence capabilities, the residual strengths of governments that we are now digging our heels in against, like Venezuela and Cuba, we are looking at a lot of showmanship that at some point, so that he does not look like Taco, he is going to have to do something or lose face, he said, using an acronym for Trump always chickens out. What I am not convinced is that it will be successful for the U.S. national interest, but it will be successful for their political interest, which is basically go ahead and just blow everything up.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this legal breaking reporting and video analysis update for the afternoon of Saturday, October 25th, 2025. If you did enjoy this legal breaking reporting video analysis update, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy for more. And follow along for more legal breaking news on the side of politics that you need to know about. More to come soon.